work for an employer that offers you a non-qualified deferred comp plan? Are you wondering what that might be and whether you should use it? Well, here to talk with me about this is Dana Anspach from Sensible Money. Dana, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you because this is a question that we get often from folks. And I guess the best place to start is with a definition.
Yeah, what is a non-qualified deferred comp plan? It's a great question. In simple terms, it's a plan that allows you to take some of your compensation and tuck it away, not pay taxes on it today, and defer it until later. And at the time that you take it back out, of course, you'll pay taxes then. Now, that sounds relatively easy to understand, but there are actually several types of non-qualified deferred comp plans, and they all work a little bit differently. And the actual plan document that governs these plans can even have underlying provisions that can vary from plan to plan, even if the overall plan design is similar. So it takes a lot more digging. When someone tells us they have a 401k plan, we go, oh, okay, I know how that works. When someone tells us they have a non-qualified deferred comp plan, we go, wait a second, I need to know a lot more. Is it a 457 plan or is it a 409A plan? And if it's a 457 plan, there are different types of those. There's ones offered by state or local governments that work much like a 401k plan. And there's a different kind offered by nonprofits or non-government tax exempt entities. That type also has its own set of rules. The type of non-qualified deferred comp plan we encounter the most often is something called a 409A plan. And this is a type of plan offered by for-profit companies. We can see them offered by big public companies like Microsoft, privately held companies, and even by large partnerships like legal firms or medical practices, for example.
So tell us a little bit more about how these 409A plans work.
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense to look at a couple of real life examples. So I'll tell you one case we came across. This was an attorney. He was a partner in a fairly large practice. During his working years, each year he got to elect a percentage of his compensation that he was going to defer into the plan. Now, keep in mind, he's self-employed, so you don't know what your comp is going to be for the year. So you're electing that percentage. And you make that election in the fall of the year. So, for example, if you had a non-qualified deferred comp plan in the fall of this year, you would be choosing what portion of your compensation that you are going to defer next year. Now, here's one of the key differences between this type of plan and a 401k. With a 401k, you can start or stop your contributions anytime. You can log online and say, I'm going to contribute more or less or stop for a while. With a deferred comp plan, once you've made that election, it's locked in for the year. So you need to think about how that's going to work out. Sometimes you're deferring a percentage of your bonus for the upcoming year, and you don't really know what the dollar amount of that bonus is going to be yet. That is a key difference. Another difference, at the time you elect to put money into the deferred comp plan, you have to elect exactly how that money is going to come back out. And the election options can vary from plan to plan. Some examples, you might choose a lump sum at termination or an installment payment that'll pay out over 5 years or 10 years or 15 years at termination. Or you could pick a specific calendar year in some cases that money would come back out. But again, once you choose that election of how the money is going to come back out, it is locked in. You also have to think about taxes. In the case of the attorney I'm talking about, he was self-employed. And so when that deferred comp money came back out to him, he had to pay not only ordinary income taxes, but also FICA taxes, payroll taxes. And he had to pay both the employee portion and the employer portion. That's just how his particular plan was set up. In most of the plans we see where somebody is an employee of a larger corporation, they've already paid the FICA taxes when the money went into the plan. And so usually the only tax liability they have is ordinary income taxes on the distributions as they occur. But this is an area where we see a lot of room for planning opportunities, is being more careful about how you choose those distribution elections and making sure that it's coordinated with all of the other items going on in your plan.
So if you had the opportunity to structure a 409A plan, how might you go about it?
Yeah, so let's look at another example. We recently worked with a client who's a employee of a large technology company, publicly traded company. He's been contributing to his deferred comp plan since 2015. And every year he makes a separate election for the salary portion he's going to contribute and the bonus portion. And with every election, he has a different distribution election. So he had one randomly scheduled to pay out in 2050, another one in 2032. A lot of them were set to pay out over 5 or 10-year installments that would start at his termination. And so we had to make a custom schedule with, I mean, there were over 15, maybe 20 different buckets of how this money was going to get paid out in order to figure out how that was going to land on his tax return and if it actually made sense or if there was a way to improve the outcome. So once we had that schedule, we could go in and go, wow, this set of years right here, you're going to have a lot of this deferred comp paying out and a lot of other things going on, stock options and that are going to be vesting those years. And so if we can defer some of that income to a later year, it's going to mean you're going to spread your tax liability out. So going forward, we were able to recommend that he choose the 15-year installment payout option. And for a few of his past decisions, we were able to go back and say, okay, we think you should change this distribution election. Now, there's a caveat. When you go back and change how the money's going to come out, you can't move it up in time. You can only move it out in time. And so when you make a change to your distribution election, it has to be at least 5 years after your prior election. And typically that means if you had set something like at termination, we don't know exactly what that date might be, then when you change it, it'll start 5 years after whatever your termination date is. And usually you have to make that change to your distribution election at least 12 months prior to when it was supposed to be distributed, and typically at least 12 months prior to your termination or end of employment with the company. So you have to be careful, right? You make some big choices with this, and you really want to plan it out so that it is making the most sense for you.
Yeah. So what else do people need to be careful about when they're thinking about these plans?
Yeah. So another case we came across pointed out a few hidden risks that we see. We were working with a highly compensated employee of a private company, and he had selected all of his deferred comp to pay out in a lump sum at termination. That was going to be about $1.5 million hitting that tax return all at once. That's a lot of taxable income. In addition, it creates sequence risk. So if you think about when that money comes out of the plan, it's all cashed out of the investments on a single day. That's an awful lot riding on what might be happening in the market that month or that year, or in particular that day. So if you have a huge liquidity event coming up like that, you really need to adjust your investments accordingly. What we did is suggest to him that he change that election. So it would have to start 5 years after whatever his termination date ends up being, and then spread it out over 5 years. So this, for this particular person, helped significantly spread the tax liability out over some lower income tax years. And in addition, it reduced that sequence risk, that dependence on what might happen in a single day in the market. However, it does expose him to a different type of risk. So deferred comps are generally unfunded liabilities of the company. So if his company should file bankruptcy, it is possible that his deferred comp benefit could be at risk. Now, in his case, he felt highly confident in the future of the company he worked for. He wasn't concerned about that at all. So he thought it made sense to delay the payout, spread out the tax implications, reduce the sequence risk. But there are definitely cases where people may not have that level of confidence in the company they work for. And in that case, they may say, you know what? I'll pay the extra taxes. I understand the sequence risk, but I feel like it's safer overall to take that lump sum up front. And that is why you have to work through all of these things on a case-by-case basis.
So just a question around funding. If you have an opportunity to fund an HSA, a 401k, and a non-qualified, would you fill up the HSA and 401k buckets first before you filled up your non-qualified deferred comp plan?
Typically, yes. HSAs, I'm a big fan of. If you have the opportunity to contribute to an HSA, for a lot of highly compensated people, it's not a lot of money you can put in, but it is tax deductible when it goes in. It grows tax free. If you use it for healthcare, it's tax free coming out. You can't beat that. 401k, yes, you almost always want to max your 401k plan because there's less restrictions. We just talked about some of the caveats that come with deferred comp and some of the risks. You don't have those same I want to call them obstacles in a 401k plan. So definitely you want to max out those more traditional options first. Then if you have extra income and you're in the highest tax bracket, sometimes you can take some of that income falling in the top tier and strategically put it in that deferred comp plan and then coordinate how it may come back out when ideally you will be in a lower tax rate.
Right. And then in terms of investment options, obviously you might have a variety of options to choose from, but you probably want to coordinate them with your other investments.
You do, or, as you know from talking with me many times, I prefer to coordinate the investments based on the timing of when you need to use the money. So you could approach a household allocation by kind of allocating across all your household assets, or as I was talking about in these cases where that money's going to come back out. Would I put my money 100% in stocks if I knew I had a liquidity event in 4 years? No, I wouldn't. Or if I have the money scheduled to pay out, let's say over a 5-year time frame, that's very different than if I'm 20 years away from retirement and then that money's gonna grow. So I think you really want to pay attention to when is that money coming back out of the plan, because you can't transfer out of a deferred comp plan in kind, right? They cash in the investments and send you the money. So making sure those investments have the appropriate level of risk for the timing of when that liquidity event's going to happen is pretty important.